tonight, my topic is banknotes salvaged, looted, or lost from shipwrecks. Let me move along here. I'm trying to refer to only ships that had commercial shipments of banknotes, because, of course, almost every ship would have some banknotes. I'm going to try to do it in chronological order as best I can, and hopefully there'll be a future article in the journal. So a lot of the particulars, like serial numbers, PIC and B&B numbers, and reverse sides of notes and things like that, they'll all be on the article. I have ship locations on many, but all the other stuff will also be in the article. Surprising amount of wartime material, like when ships are sunk, I actually have the U-boat number, if it's been torpedoed, that kind of thing. And then, of course, acknowledgments at the end. I had a lot of help from the IBNS crowd on the forum. They gave me places to go look and bird dog. They had good starting information. So I had a pretty good help from the forum on many of these. So when banknotes are produced, sent, typically they're sent as printed notes, but lacking serial numbers or signatures, or what we call remainders. But sometimes there's just the banknote substrate is sent because the mill is in a different location, and sometimes the complete note is sent, which of course is not very secure. Here's kind of a roll-up of all the things I found. There was 7 different printers that had losses. You can see the big loser was Bradbury Wilkinson, followed closely by American Banknote. If you tally all those up, you'll end up with 30. But if you look down at the bottom, you'll see the total number of ships is 34. Well, what that tells you is 4 of the ships had more than one printer's banknote on board, like Bradbury Wilkinson and De La Rue or something like that. So that's why that's kind of skewed. Also, anytime any of the banknotes were salvaged, they got put over in the salvage column, even though some or most of the notes may have been lost. So if any were salvaged, it went in the salvage tally line. The oldest one I found was 1841, a paddle steamer, the P.S. Cromwell. It had Perkins-Bacon notes that were headed to Australia. That's the kind of ship with the steam paddle wheel on the side. I don't know how seaworthy they were, but however, it made it all the way from England to Australia, only to get run up on a sandbar off Perth Harbor there. The representative, Mr. Robinson, for the Union Bank was on board, along with, I think, 40 other people. And, well, to get it off the sandbar, they did what's often done. We need to lighten the load, so they dumped everything off the ship, including the banknotes. All for naught, didn't work. The ship was lost. And the sandbar, which was unnamed, now has a name. It's called the Clommel Sandbar, due to the loss of this ship. The next one I found, next oldest, was in 1860, the Atlas. I found this one on my own. I found it in legal records. And what happened was Bank of Canada was in a legal dispute with a bus company for loss of notes. I can't believe they sent notes by bus, but they did. Anyhow, they cited legal precedent for this case. So I looked around until I found a French-speaking legal volume that discussed this. And sure enough, once I had the name of the ship, then I could bird dog it and figure it out. And that it was the Atlas. It was lost somewhere in the Mediterranean. They lost 4 different varieties of francs. This is the reason I did the article. You can't see the CSA watermark that well. It's pretty faint, right? I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but CSA is right here.
Yeah, it shows up pretty well.
Good. Okay. The Bermuda was stopped in around the Bahamas trying to run the Union blockade of CSA, and they took the Bermuda up to Philadelphia and confiscated all the goods on board. There were 12 passengers. They were in prison. I found a lot of this information out in the numismatic side, but I didn't actually find the amount. Then once again, I found a legal document, found the exact amount of this paper that was confiscated, which ended up being 490 reams of paper. It had already been used on a $10 CSA note of 1861. Notice that it was also used later on a $100 note of 1862. How's that? They confiscated them. Well, obviously they ran the blockade successfully, both before and after the Bermuda was captured. My son got this note at the International Banknote show just prior to COVID up in Kansas City. And I was not at the table he was at. We had split to conquer the place. And once he showed it to me, I thought it was very intriguing. And I thought it was going to be the oldest thing I would find when I started doing the article. But lo and behold, I found those other 2. By the way, the U.S. went ahead and used these blanks. The BEP did, what became the BEP. They used it on fractional currency. And actually, you can find more of the specimens for fractionals with the CSA watermark than the actual released ones. The other thing that's kind of interesting is you still can find blanks. So they either didn't use them all, or some more ran the blockade and showed up later because the CSA didn't use them all. I don't know which is the case. Certainly don't know which one's the case for the one my son bought. I don't have an exact date on this. Don't know why, but it definitely was the SS Benville. Had Chile and Peru notes that were lost. I think this was around Cape Cod area that these notes were lost. And you can, I see, I don't know if you can see back over here or not. I actually have the amount of each one listed over here on how many were lost. None were salvaged. And the total was 197,000 notes. 1892, the steamer Alvo was lost. It was carrying notes for Colombia and Haiti both. That was definitely an accidental collision. It's what happened in this case. Here's more of Alvo notes, getting up a little higher in the number, 250,000 notes, 125,000 notes. 50,000 notes not salvaged for Guatemala notes. Also notice the date's not exact. These are from American banknote records that were recorded in Latin American issues, American Banknote Company, I think by a guy named Moran, if I remember right. This beautiful image and some of the information Lawrence Pope provided, and this note will show up in his brand new book on ultramarinos. It was unknown ship, but the whole shipment was lost. Notice at the bottom, the reason we know it was lost by German fires, it has reprint. Original sunk by the Germans is what's in the margin there at the top. Here, an unknown ship was lost that was carrying American banknote companies to China. The 600,000 won is the amount of the value, not the number of notes. A small amount of these were salvaged. Most were lost. The portrait there is General Juan. Can't remember his last name. When they
Yuan Shikai.
That's the guy. Yeah, Juan Shikai. When they went to think about reprinting, they didn't have to worry about it. Juan Shikai had died, so they decided not to do a reprint. Here's more of them. Here's more of them. Here's the SS Springwell was lost. The Bank of England heading to India. More notes that were lost. And then here the Chantilla was lost. Had Burma and India notes on it. By the way, the Chantilla is a unlucky name for a ship. The Germans sunk this in World War I, and lo and behold, in World War II, they sunk a ship again named the SS Chantilla, although it did not have banknotes on it. But in any case, not a lucky name for a ship. The SS Mongolia was lost with T. de la Rue notes on it from Ceylon. I think the Mongolia hit a mine. Here's the Camberwell. Had Bank of England notes on it for India. There's conflicting reports on this, whether it was torpedoed or mined. It would appear the more reliable source was the ship was mined or hit a mine rather than torpedoed. The passenger ship Sharilla was sunk. Had India 1 rupee notes on it. Some of these were salvaged. It was torpedoed, the ship was. As I'm going through these, I'm talking money, but let's not forget what else was on board the ships, people. So lots of folks lost their lives in these ships. Here's some more that were salvaged. Cargo ship Barrister had Perkins Bacon and Company notes on it. Remember the first one, the Clonal, was also Perkins. This one was torpedoed as well. And I got this from the Polish records. They didn't know what ship, but what happened here, it wasn't exactly a ship sinking. The 1,000 and I believe 5,000 notes were on board a ship in English harbor, and the English roustabouts that were working the cruise there thought that the equipment and everything on that ship was going to support Bolsheviks in Poland, so they dumped the entire cargo before it had a chance to leave harbor. Almost all of these were lost. None of them were ever used, although the remainders were sent to the Bank of Poland. Steamer ship Ignoma had several different banknotes attached that were on the way to these islands. This was not caused by enemy action, however. It was an accidental fire that occurred on the Ignoma. Ocean liner Egypt. This was expensive. This was an accidental collision that occurred, and what you're seeing there is the Egypt on the left, and Artiglio, I believe it is. That's the Artiglio II ship drying the notes over here on the right. The reason it's called the Artiglio II, well, the Artiglio I, while trying to salvage these, set off a charge in the ocean liner to get it in a position where they could get into it. Turns out it had munitions on it, which they knew, but by the time the Artiglio got there, this would be, I think, in the 1930-31 range. They thought that it would no longer be active, if you will, and so their charge set off whatever munitions was on the Egypt, and the Artiglio was too close, and it sank, and they lost several of the crew there. So these crewmen may have been replacements or from the original crew. You got to wonder what they were thinking, going back on the same job that their mates lost their lives. I said it was expensive. The banknotes, there are 3 sets, but guess what? That wasn't the big expense. There was 5.5 tons of gold and 18 tons of silver on board that was recovered. That's enough to buy a small banana republic, probably. I think it was right that comes out to about $200 million worth of gold just in ore value. A lot of it was in the form of sovereigns, gold sovereigns, which now numismatically would be tremendously higher than that. So it was a huge stowage on this, the least of which was these paper notes. Of course, they were salvaged since we saw a scene of them drying these out. In 1939, we're into World War II now. An unknown ship lost a load of Bradbury Wilkinson notes for Afghanistan. All we know is it was lost in action. It could have possibly not been on board a ship, but since from Bradbury to Afghanistan is mostly overseas, it's assumed that's how it was lost. There was 2 types, the 5 and the 100, I believe. If you find any of these notes, they have to be from salvage. These were never reprinted. Sometime during 1939-40 period of time. And these were going from Japan to China. Notice it's got Confucius on it. And yes, that's one of the famous ones where he's got an obscene gesture. The Chinese engraver changed how his hands were positioned. And so that's considered an obscene gesture note. Again, you won't find these unless they have been salvaged. I've had this note for 50 years. It's in pristine condition, beautiful American banknote. What I didn't know was that they were all captured by the Germans on an unknown ship. They had no use for them, but rather than dump them, they gave them to their Axis allies, Japan, who dumped them in China. And that is probably why you can find them in pristine condition, because guess what? The Chinese heard about it and had no use for them. I did not know this. For 50 years, I've had this beautiful note and did not know that. They also captured plates as well, by the way, and they may have printed up more notes having the plates. Also, they weren't quite finished, so I think the Japanese applied serial numbers to them. This is something Joe Bowling would normally be discussing, I would think. This is a little interesting too. The Montesquieu, they actually scuttled their load. They were trying to evade this bank. They had Bank of France notes, and they were trying to evade British. And eventually, they ended up scuttling their shipment, which included Bank of France notes, probably going to the French territories. And I looked at this and said, "Huh? Why would the French try to be avoiding the British?" Well, this is probably Vichy France would be the explanation rather than Free France. Okay, there's actually two that occurred in 1940, the Autumn Median and the Humanis, that are recorded as having notes from Malay on them. And there's a little possibility that these are not actually the case. For one, it is recorded that the Autumn Median was lost, but I got a pretty lengthy list of items that was on board the ship, and no currency was mentioned. And guess what? There is no Humanis ship. There's a Humias, spelled differently, but it was over close to Sierra Leone. So why it would have notes for Malay on it? Possibly for the troops going to their next theater of operations, but that would be awful dangerous running these notes, because it would give the enemy a chance to know where their next point of attack is. So both of these have issues. In any case, the note on the left there was salvaged, but I don't think it was from the ship. It was just salvaged from the sea. And then the $5 note here was also supposed to have been on board. This one is not. It's just a representative note of what it looked like. There's an unknown ship sunk in 1940, had these British Guyana notes on it. 500,000 notes lost, none recovered. This is pretty well documented, the SS Breda. In fact, IBNS has a great article on this. There was 30 boxes of banknote paper. By boxes, we're talking big boxes, by the way. It had Portal's paper on board. You can see the Breda there is really close to shore. Well, yeah, it was. It was not actually hit it was a near hit, and it broke the ship up partially, so where it sank. Actually, they were able to tow it in close to shore like this, but then the storm came in, and the actual location is not like this. It's further out, but still easily available for scuba divers to get to. It's a very popular swim site even to this day in Scotland, I want to say. Here's 2 salvage sheets that were on board, 5 rupee and a 10 rupee. These are quite common, you can find. Okay, the Zaktheos was bombed in 1941. It was Bradbury Wilkinson produced it, and it made it to Greece fine, but the ones they wanted to go to Crete with were on this ship, and the ship was bombed. And a lot of these ended up showing up on shore. I own one. This is a salvaged one. The only thing, these were overprinted from 100 notes, and so the locals had to get creative and do their own overprinting. And you can tell the fakes. The lettering is not the same type of font. But anyhow, there were some instant millionaires there in Crete when they found these on their shore. This is another fairly famous one, the cargo ship Politician. All the locals there called it the Polly. Delarue notes heading to Jamaica, 74,000 of them. What happened was the Politician was trying to avoid the Germans, so they went up the coast from England and ran aground in a rather remote area of Scotland, very close to shore. So a good batch of these were salvaged. What the ship was really known for is the premium whiskey and bourbon that was on board. This ship was going to make a stop in the U.S. and dump off all the whiskey and bourbon at a high price and then move on to Jamaica and give them their money. Well, it seems that the Scottish have a term for things that come from the sea. In Gaelic, it comes out, well, in the English translation is something like treasures from Mary, meaning the Virgin Mary. And that's their way of saying anything that comes from the sea is got to have been sent there by the Virgin Mary, and they didn't consider it pilfering at all. So they went out on board and found this. They were really after the bourbon and whiskey. They found quite a few later. Quite a few of these notes had oil on them. Well, the deal was they used the banknotes to wipe their hands off, trying to get the oily crates of bourbon and whiskey out from this ship. So a great many of these have oil on them. Yeah, they made a movie out of it called Whiskey Galore. And there's also a book I own called Polly, which is a little more technical. The Whiskey Galore is based on actual facts, but made in an entertaining form. This, if you look it up, this is often called the City of Yorkshire, that was sunk with Bradbury notes on it, headed to Turkey, but actually it was the City of Rabaul is the correct ship. A lot of these were salvaged because, again, they washed on shore. Once Turkey found out about it, they demonetized them. But of course, this is back in the 40s, so you don't have instant communication, and again, a lot of instant millionaires here. People just went ahead and put them into circulation. There's both 50s and hundreds. The hundreds didn't seem to make to shore much, but the 50s did. I own this one. They ended up releasing a different set with different colors rather than chance using the same note with different serial number. They just used the same plates and used a different color scheme when they did release these. Bradbury Wilkinson produced a bunch of notes for St. Pierre, Judubee, and Reunion. They all look the same. If you may recall, these all look exactly the same, and the only way you can tell where they're for is the serial number sequence. None of these were salvaged. There's two possibilities here on these French Indochina notes. These are fairly common. The ones with the B on it, I own this one. It was in I want to say Malaya. No, it wasn't. It was in the Philippines. It was either enemies overran an area with the notes, or a ship was sunk in the harbor. In either case, a lot of them were salvaged by the Japanese. So again, these were demonetized or not used right away. That's why you can still find a bunch of these. There are other serial numbers that were not salvaged, and they have different big prefixes. Here's another one of Lawrence Pope's notes. These are gorgeous. Love them. This is a specimen of his. This is not the actual note lost, but it represents it well. Again, an unknown ship was lost with 300,000 of these on board. Beaconshire. I think this was one of the few ones that was lost by the Italian attack rather than the Germans, and the ship was bombed, and it had you can see 12,000 of the 84,000 notes were salvaged. De La Rue had some notes heading to Ceylon. It's a guess that it was this was occurred at the only enemy action that occurred in Ceylon was at the I think Colombo, and it occurred on Easter Sunday. It was an air raid, so these were probably on board a ship at that time. Anyhow, 200,000 of them were lost, and 625,000 of them were lost. Bradbury Wilkinson. This is, notice this is the newest one. It was lost in 1979. It had aboard 60 million notes for Seychelles, and it was lost in an accidental collision. You can see this is an actual shot of the ship going down. Here is a salvage note and what the note should look like. I believe, in fact, I'm positive this salvage note was furnished by a fellow IBNS member. Here's what the other side looks like. Okay, there are some others that I call the rumor mill. I have information on loss, but I don't have enough information to be sure that it's correct. There was in 1914, there was supposedly an unknown ship that was lost in the Battle of the Falklands. That would have been Admiral Spree, German Admiral Spree. And one or more of the ships supposedly had $1 million from the Dutch Asian Bank on board, but I haven't had any other verification on this. The Rubens was definitely sunk. Well, sunk is not the right word. It was shot at and caught fire, and the Germans were smart enough here. They pulled in close to harbor and actually started more fires. The British cruised for about 30 minutes around it and considered it a complete loss and left. And the crew put the fires out and used all of the, and was able to salvage all of the equipment that was on board, which was war effort type equipment. I think I have a tally on this one as well, and I don't think it showed any of the German East African notes. So while the sinking is correct, whether it had notes, 50 rupee notes on it is still in question. The SS Afrique was definitely lost off of the coast of France in 1920. The boiler failed and was in it, so the ship was unable to maneuver properly, and it ran into a reef. Supposedly had 15 million French francs on it. That's even what the Bank of France had on it, but a large amount of these showed up in France with the exact same serial numbers. So the question was, did they ever make it onto the ship or not? Or since it was lost at the coast, is it this similar to the Polly, the French Galore, or the whiskey Galore Polly type thing, and somebody absconded with the notes on shore? Unknown. Anyhow, I don't have enough definitively to put it in the for sure column. Here's another. There you can find whole bundles of this note in this condition, which is obviously quite poor. And the word was that these were bombed in Victoria Harbor, but I don't have any verification for that. But you can certainly find whole bundles of these notes, so it's very plausible. This isn't one that was attributed as Shipwreck Salvage by PCGS. Well, there's a problem with this. They correctly attributed it as S275A. A note that looks very much like this, S266, was lost on the SS Egypt. And that one was, I think, Bradbury Wilkinson. Well, the problem is S275A was printed locally in England or in India. So what was a shipload of money for India doing offshore India? So this one is definitely questionable. Now, it's entirely possible that it was from a shipwreck and maybe a crew member had several of these on board. You certainly can't say that a whole shipment was lost, though, because, again, these were printed locally. I gave this presentation a few days ago to the Oklahoma City Coin Club, and so I have three or so at the end here of notable wrecks that did not have shipments on board but had notes on it. This is one that was for the home folks, Eufaula, Oklahoma. They only found 789 notes in the bursar's satchel. This is one of them. This one's a little interesting. The Flying Enterprise was lost in a collision, and it had two large batches of money on it, $600,000 in the cargo hold and another $200,000 in the mailroom. And it was supposedly carrying iron ore also to the U.S. Notice right here, you can see my mouse, that is the captain. Now you might think, is he grandstanding? Is he just the captain goes down to the ship? What's he doing? What he's doing is saving the shipment for the company by staying on board international salvage laws were not in place, and the cargo was not available for any salvage ship to salvage. So he was able to save the load for the owners of the ship line. Over here to the right, this is a Bank of Brussels, and they're counting all the money. It was mostly English pounds and US dollars. Also on board, I said it supposedly had iron ore. Well, using nautical terms, the scuttlebutt is it actually had, I think, zirconium on board, and that was to be used in the first nuclear sub, the USS Nautilus in the United States. And of course, they just put it was secret, so they put iron ore on the manifest rather than zirconium. The Andrea Doria was lost heading to New York. It was another collision. Peter Gimmel was the one that spearheaded and actually participated in the salvage operation of this. If the name Gimbal sounds familiar, here in the U.S., we used to have a large store franchise called Gimbals, and this was the son of Gimbals. He was not connected to the store, but had lots of money and was a financier, and he financed the salvage operations. These are the notes that were sent to PCGS to be graded. You can see the largest one by far is English or a U.S. 1935E notes, 2,300 plus. That's silver certificates, one of which I have here. Joe Bowling also has some, and you can hit him up for some. He has some spare. He kept one for himself, but he has one or more available.
Yeah, mine are the Italian 1,000 lira pieces.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. That's the one we got. I have both the silver certificate and the 1,000 lira. Thanks, Joe. You can see there's less of the 1,000 lira notes available than the U.S. note, but for whatever reason, the dollar notes command more money in the marketplace. Not sure why. Here's one of mine, and it looks very similar to Joe's on the left there. And then there's mine on the right of the silver certificate. My screen does not show the entire right side of that note, but there is a difference. There's a grade on the US one. If I turn around, it has grade B. For salvage operations, they don't use the 70 scale, they use ABC. So this is considered a B, which is would be translate to decent. A is still damaged, but less damage, and C is very high damage. These cases are very thick and heavy, as Joe can attest to. When I showed these to the local coin club, they said the notes are of less importance than the provenance, and wouldn't it be easy just to take this lucite and put another note in it? And that would be true. Also, notice this, the PCGS and all the on this. Look at the next one. Here's a different note. Still has a COA, but notice there's no PCGS in the lower left. But you can get a feeling for how thick this case is. Also, this note is less secure, I'll put it that way, because these two pieces of lucite are held together by those four rods there. And on Joe and I's on all sides, there's a PCS tape where the two come together. So if anybody were to take it apart, you would break the PCS tape. So I consider the PCS ones with PCS much more secure, I say. And this also points to the fact that not all of them made it to PCGS, although some of them were still encased with COAs on them. It's a good point, good time here to point out that there have been several articles in the IBS Journal on specific ships mentioned here. The SS Breda was authored by the guy that bought all the notes, Richard Lobel. In 50-1s, the Banknotes Hybrid Ash and the Salvage of Egypt was done. And then another one, Bombs, Banknotes, and the Tragic Tale of Three Turkish Banknotes was done. And that was the City of Rabaul one that I mentioned earlier as well. So these three articles are available if you want specific information about specific ships. And I think that's it. Yes.
Thank you, Roland. Very, very interesting. I'll open to a Q&A session. If anybody has a question, you can unmute yourself and just ask, or you can type in the chat.
Yes, Roland, this is Bruce here. Regarding the whiskey note, it's my understanding that that these notes were blue in color, but when there was a legal salvaging of the notes and some of them made their way to Jamaica in circulation, it was decided to change the color of the note to purple. However, as late as I think 1948, De La Rue was still issuing blue notes. The purple ones didn't come in until roughly 50 or 51, as I understand. So do you have any understanding why there was such a lag between when these notes were illegally salvaged and then they decided to change the color in the note?
No, I don't. I also noted that, and I have no good explanation why they would wait that long.
Yeah.
None.
Of course, we don't know how long it took for them to actually get into circulation after they were, salvaged by the islanders and the Hebrides there.
Yes, it's not like they could spend Jamaican notes in Scotland, so
No.
That's a good point.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, this is Kavan. I just wanted to comment that the lost in 1942, as you mentioned, is most probably incorrect. Basically, because the Japanese bombing of Colombo was on the 5th of April, and these notes were officially demonetized on the 23rd of March of 1942. My feeling is that it must have been in 1939, 40, or 41, because in 1941, they issued a new series of notes. So it's very unlikely that they were shipping 1939 notes in 1942 after they issued a new series. So it most probably happened in 1940 rather than in 1942.
That's a real good point. Also, the fact that it was demonetized before the raid on Colombo definitely tells us it wasn't the Easter raid when the notes were lost.
Right. So that's one I wanted to point out.
Good point. I'm definitely glad I did the presentation here before I sent the manuscript in to Alex, because now I can correct the Easter raid definitely, because it doesn't seem to hold up the weight of scrutiny.
Roland, are you aiming to build a collection as well of what you presented?
I have a small collection I did mainly for the presentation, and I do that on several types of things. Some of these are readily available and not too expensive, but it's a fairly finite amount that were salvaged. But yeah, I like them. I will attempt to get more as I can.
Yeah, sounds one of the many ideas to start collecting, actually.
Yeah, I don't need more reasons to collect things, but it seems to work that way, as it does with most collectors.
I have a question. Is it known the locations where these notes, the ships were lost? Is that known? For example, the one in 1917 in Sri Lanka, Ceylon. Do we know locations where the Mongolia, for example, was lost?
I have what locations I have on the paper, and let me see. I have the paper up here. I will look that one up for you. You were interested in the Mongolia. Unfortunately, no. I have the serial number ranges, but all I have is lost at sea. That, and it was 15% of the total banknote production was lost. But no location other than it was a German mine. Well, it does say south of Bombay, India, but that's a big area.
Okay, that's more than I have.
Okay, yeah, it was south of Bombay, India.
Okay.
There's any registry which actually keep records of where ships sunk?
Yes, I got quite a bit of information from those. Let's see if I doubt that I cited them though, because
no, I mean, so technically, if we research, we can find the location.
yes, once you have a ship, there's a site that does shipwrecks, and it gives it gives pretty good data on where it's at if it's a place that you can visit, because what they've done, it's geared towards people towards scuba divers, and if possible they list the contents on board, that kind of thing. And I'd have to get back up online, but if you punch in a specific ship name and put, let's say, SS Santilla sinking, it'll be in the top 3 or 4. That particular site is.
Sure.
I found a couple errors on the site, but for the most part, they have the information correct. They always have the ship correct, but not always some of the other data. But it's a good starting point. When I go bird dogging these things, that's the name of the ship is very helpful. Obviously, you can see there's 15 of them. I have no idea what the ship name was, and that was because I have records of from American Banknote Company, at least for the Latin American records, for instance, or somebody's looked up records for me. The banknote book apparently has good records for Galore and some others, and so he has some information there. Banknote book does too. Let's see, Bank of China had information. Weebly Asia has information on Chinese stuff. Banknotes of the government of Malta, John Sandrock is a good source.
Well, the people who write maritime insurance policies keep track of all this stuff too, starting with Lloyd's of London, and I don't know who all else is, a modern insurer, but they definitely want to know all that information.
Yeah, I tried looking up Lloyd's directly and did not have good luck, but I did have some luck looking up, you're right, the manifests. And a lot of times the manifests are available. In fact, I mentioned a couple, three where manifests do not show banknotes, but yet we have them recorded as having banknotes on them.
Any more question for Roland? Seems not. All right, then we close. Roland, thanks again for sharing this with us. And good night, good day, good morning, wherever you are.
Thanks, one and all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye now. Thank you.
Bye.